Hey, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this live session in science. My name is Amy Defoe. I'm one of the science teachers here at Graduation Alliance. Thanks for joining. I hope you're having a great day, and I hope this session is informative to you. Before we get started, these sessions are being recorded. It's being recorded right now for lots of different good reasons. Of course, we know that, timings of our live sessions, sometimes they don't always work for everybody, and life's always so busy, and we got so many responsibilities, and these are recorded so that you do have the opportunity to view this session at a time that might be a little bit better for you in your schedule. Also, maybe what we're talking about today, you're not quite yet there, or you're in a different course. Today, we're going to be talking about cellular respiration. And so you have this option to go back and view these sessions as you go through it. It's pretty cool. Think about, we have this nice library collection of all our live sessions. And as you're going through your courses and all your courses, you can think about that when you come to an activity or a lesson. And you're like, hey, I wonder if there's a live session on this. I would like a little bit more information, or I have a question about how to do this assignment. You can go to the YouTube Teacher Mentor channel, and you can quickly take a look. And sure enough, I'm sure there's going to be a live session there for you to help you out. It's pretty cool. Also, during these sessions, I do enjoy and encourage the feedback. So if you have questions, comments, or you want to answer a question, which would be great. I love having this interaction in these live sessions. You can unmute yourself. You can just talk out loud, or you can use that chat function down at the bottom. You can type in if you have a question or a response, or you have some feedback, you can use that chat. So whatever is your mode of communication that you prefer, go ahead and do that. If you do have some background noise, please do make sure that you mute yourself so it doesn't come in through the recording. Okay, great. So we're going to continue on here. We're going to be talking about cellular respiration, and then we're also going to look at units introductions and how those can be helpful to you when you're studying as you're going through the course and preparing for the final. So I want to show you some good stuff that you'll find in there. So here's our agenda for this session. Is I'm going to talk about cellular respiration, and we're going to look at biology semester 1. It comes mainly from unit 5, but it's intertwined. We call it interactions in systems. So we're going to be looking at kind of the carbon cycle and looking at how photosynthesis and cellular respiration all work together. Then we'll open it up for some questions. And that could be questions about cellular respiration, or questions that you might have on a different topic or course or activity. And then we'll finish up and we'll talk about course and unit introductions and how those can be helpful. And then before we end today, we'll make sure that you have any last minute questions answered. Here we go. Okay, guys, cellular respiration. Let's first talk about what it is. What does cellular respiration mean? And yeah, we can see this little cartoon kind of show us a little bit about, Homer Simpson and his, he needs his donuts, and he eats his donuts, and it gives him energy, right? Okay, so cellular respiration is the process in which sugars, that's that glucose, it's converted into a usable energy form, which is ATP. ATP is the type of energy that our cells can use. So it's the energy that's been then broken down, okay? We know for cellular respiration to take place, we have to consume or somehow get or make sugar. If you're a producer, we know we're not producers, we're consumers, and so we need to eat foods, consume, so that we can get that glucose. Cellular respiration is in that process that takes that glucose into a usable form that our bodies and our cells can use. Okay, we know that, of course, there is a chemical equation for cellular respiration. And in that equation, we have things like what we need, what that transformation is, and then, of course, what the output is, or the waste product, what's produced then in the end. So for cellular respiration to take place, we need sugar and oxygen. Here we get the transformation, and what is then produced is carbon dioxide, water, and energy in the form of ATP that's usable. So again, the inputs, what we need, sugar and oxygen, what it produces, carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So when we talk about this, organic molecules, all living or once living organisms are made up of organic molecules. Carbons carbon-based molecules that contain carbons bonded to hydrogen, oxygen, and other atoms. There's 4 main types of organic molecules: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. I'm sure those first 3, carbs, lipids, and proteins, sound pretty familiar as you're thinking about, the food chain, food pyramid, what we need to consume in our daily diets. And then also nucleic acids. As you could probably look in there, nucleic probably makes you think of the nucleus of the cell. In this unit, we're going to focus on carbohydrates and lipids. So these are the types of bonds that contain a lot of energy, and that's that energy that's going to keep our bodies functioning, the processes of our cells continuing to grow. It takes energy to chemically join simple sugars together to make a more complex carbohydrate. But when you have a big molecule, when it's broken down into a smaller one, the energy in those bonds is released. So again, it's the breaking down of these molecules releases that energy. So how do we release that energy? Well, living is work, and as consumers, we must, hey, welcome, we're talking about some cellular respiration today. We must eat to provide the energy our cells need to do that work. And so cells need energy that's stored in large organic food molecules to grow, repair, divide, and of course to survive. So again, we have to consume. Cell respiration is the process of releasing that energy from food. And where does that occur? Well, in eukaryotic cells, like the cells of our bodies, it occurs in the mitochondria of our cells. Now, the mitochondria is a type of organelle. So think of a little organ inside of a cell. So here we can see an image of a cell. And this little bean-shaped object, that's the mitochondria, and that's where cellular respiration is taking place. Mitochondria are nicknamed or known as the powerhouse of the cell. So think of it as the energy farm. Okay, there can be hundreds or even thousands of mitochondria in a single cell. Pretty crazy to think about that, huh? Oh my goodness, right? Hundreds to thousands of these in these tiny little cells. Ooh. Cells that must do lots of work, therefore, need more energy, like muscle cells. So they're going to have more of these mitochondria per cell than more of a less active. So pretty cool that our cells, can do this. They have more of the structures that they need based on what their form and function is. So here we get to that ATP. So mitochondria have their own double membrane system, and they're specialized to carry out the process of cell respiration. So that's their function, okay? When mitochondria break down organic molecules, so again, we're talking about those carbs, lipids, fats, they release that energy in the form of ATP. ADP stands for adenine triphosphates. ATP is named for its 3 phosphate groups. So if we looked up at a molecule of what it looks like the chemical formula, it contains the element phosphorus, and this is represented by the P in that diagram. So again, we can see we've got 3 groups, 1, 2, 3, that P's. So how is the energy released in cellular respiration? Going back to then that formula for how does this take place? Again, we've got our inputs, what we need. We have our chemical transformation, and then we have our outputs or our waste products about what's produced. So we need glucose and oxygen. This is required for cell respiration in the mitochondria. Any organic molecule that you eat, carbs, proteins, fats, are processed and used as fuel. We'll follow the process by following the breakdown of a sugar glucose to keep it simple. So look at the products of the cell respiration. This is the after. They're carbon dioxide, water, and energy in the form of ATP. Mitochondria do not create energy. Instead, mitochondria carry out a series of chemical reactions that releases that energy contained in the chemical bonds of that glucose, that sugar, and it changes it to ATP that the cell can then use. So again, the cell needs a way to use that glucose in a usable form. So it has to produce ATP. So again, cellular respiration, it needs glucose and oxygen. So we need sugar and we need oxygen. It gives off carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. There's 2 types of kind of energy sources here. We've got aerobic and anaerobic. So you'll notice that oxygen is required for cell respiration. If oxygen is absent, or there's not a whole lot of oxygen, then the process results in less energy production. So if you think about that, if you remove that oxygen, you're going to have lower energy being produced. You need oxygen for it to be produced. It can occur that it doesn't happen, but it's better off to have that oxygen. You get more energy. So because oxygen is required, cell respiration is called aerobic respiration. Now, you've probably heard of aerobics, right? And you're thinking about doing your aerobics, you're breathing more, your body needs more oxygen. So it goes hand in hand, same thing with cellular respiration, with aerobic respiration. We need oxygen, okay? So aerobic means with oxygen. Cells do have other ways to produce energy, although not as much again. So again, we remove the oxygen, we get less energy. Fungi, things like yeast, when no oxygen is available, they go through a process called fermentation. Sugar is broken down to release a lesser amount of energy. This process is called anaerobic respiration. So again, less oxygen, less energy. More oxygen, more energy, aerobic, which is what we prefer. Okay, so you might have been looking at that chemical equation and thinking like, hey, we've talked about carbon, oxygen. You might notice that it's kind of like photosynthesis, except for it's switched. Photosynthesis, it takes place in the chloroplast of cells, and it uses the sun's energy to convert carbon dioxide into carbon in the sugar glucose, and oxygen, which is released into the atmosphere. So as you think about it, producers, again, can photosynthesize. They can use the sun's energy, carbon dioxide and water, to produce sugar and oxygen. So cellular respiration is kind of opposite of that. They need oxygen, what the producer gives off, and that's sugar, okay? So cell respiration takes place in the cell's mitochondria, and it breaks down the sugar glucose to release energy in the form of ATP. Carbon dioxide is then released as the byproduct. So again, that's what photosynthesis needs. So they go hand in hand, they work off each other. While photosynthesis requires energy and produces food, cellular respiration breaks down food and releases the energy in a usable form. Plants perform both photosynthesis and respiration, while animals only perform respiration. So all organisms go through cellular respiration, but only producers photosynthesize. Okay, so photosynthesis and cellular respiration are complementary to each other. Okay, so it's the process by which living things obtain substances like water, glucose, oxygen, and carbon dioxide, but in different ways. It's through these processes plants obtain the carbon dioxide they need, and living organisms obtain that oxygen they need. So they go hand in hand. One produces something that the other needs. Okay, so I like this little cartoon here. So you think about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is what's making that sugar, making that glucose, and then cellular respiration is the process that breaks that sugar down into a usable form. Where does each take place? So again, going through, photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplast of a cell. That's where it contains that green pigment, chlorophyll, that traps, absorbs that energy from the sun. So cellular respiration, mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. So again, in photosynthesis, I use light energy to make glucose in the chloroplast, mitochondria, and I break down that glucose to make ATP in the mitochondria for cell respiration. Let's take another look at another picture. Okay, so again, comparing the two, looking at their products, okay? So with cellular respiration, you need oxygen and glucose. It produces carbon dioxide. And if you add water, that's what photosynthesis needs. Photosynthesis then produces glucose and oxygen. So again, these two processes create a balance in nature because they're giving off the byproducts that the other one needs. Another image here. So again, photosynthesis makes glucose, makes that sugar. Cellular respiration breaks the glucose. They go hand in hand. Another image here showing photosynthesis. What does it need? We need sunlight, right? Carbon dioxide, water, sunlight. We get photosynthesis. It produces oxygen and glucose. Us being consumers, we consume that glucose, we breathe in that oxygen, cellular respiration takes place, it produces ATP and carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so how does this work as a bigger picture of the carbon cycle? So in the carbon cycle, it's showing in an ecosystem how carbon is transformed, moved around, okay? So in the carbon cycle, we've got two processes. We've got cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So we think about it, how do we get CO2? So how do we get carbon dioxide? We can think about we get CO2 from burning fossil fuels. So think about burning factories burning, cars burning, fuel, right? Okay, produces CO2. That CO2 is used by plants for photosynthesis to take place. Decomposing matter, so when an organism dies, the remains of that organism breaks down and it releases that carbon. So we're all made up of carbon. That carbon then is released back up into the atmosphere. Animals give off CO2 when we respire. So when we breathe out, we give out that carbon dioxide. Okay. So this kind of highlights cellular respiration here again. ATP is the energy currency of a cell. So again, we eat to consume, we get that sugar, but we have to have, let's change that there. We have to have a way that our cells can break that down, and that's that ATP. Again, all living things respire, even plants, okay? Sometimes that's a little misconception that people have. They think, oh, well, only plants photosynthesize, which is true, but all living things respire. Cell respiration takes place in the mitochondria of a cell, and energy is stored as the chemical bond, that glucose. Plants go through photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Okay, we have activity 531. This is cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So it's putting those two processes together. Carefully examine the diagram below. Off to the side, I moved it over here for us. But in the activity, you'll see it down below. It shows the relationship between aerobic cell respiration, so that's respiration with oxygen. We get more energy that occurs in the mitochondria and the photosynthesis that occurs in the chloroplast of plant cells. You learned the details of photosynthesis in the previous unit. You should notice the cycling of matter and the flow of energy in the diagram. Both photosynthesis and cell respiration are required to sustain life on Earth. Remember, they're both giving off products that each other needs. Photosynthesis is specific to plants and other producers, but cell respiration for ATP energy production is done by all living organisms, including plants. So what they want you to do is write a 2-paragraph summary of how photosynthesis and cell respiration are related. In your first paragraph, address the cycling of matter. Be specific. How does one process provide the raw materials for the other, and vice versa? So what is produced in photosynthesis and what is produced in cellular respiration? That's what they mean by provide the raw materials. In your second paragraph, discuss the flow of energy that takes place in an ecosystem. Be sure to discuss the initial energy source as well as the role of photosynthesis and cell respiration. You'll notice that respiration is not an entirely efficient process, and some of that energy produced is lost as heat. You have to address the need for continual energy input to that ecosystem, okay? So again, it's continuous, okay? So first paragraph, they want you to explain the two processes, what the materials are. So what does photosynthesis need and produce? What does cell respiration need and produce? And then in the second paragraph, they want to explain that in terms of an ecosystem, give an example of it, okay? And that kind of goes back to maybe looking at a picture similar to this. Okay, so let's look at this picture. Here we have light energy, okay? So that's kind of our starting point that starts the cycle. So we think about photosynthesis. Here we go, photosynthesis. It needs that light energy, and it needs carbon dioxide and water. Photosynthesis takes place, and it produces glucose and oxygen. Cellular respiration uses that glucose and oxygen, and in the mitochondria of the cell, it produces ATP, carbon dioxide. Let's look at a student example. Okay, this is what a student wrote, and I broke it down into the 2 paragraphs that they provided. The student said, the diagram shows the cycling of carbon dioxide and water, organic molecules, and oxygen. Photosynthesis in the chloroplasts of plant cells and respiration in the mitochondria of plant cells provide raw materials for each. Photosynthesis provide organic molecules and oxygen, which are used in cellular respiration. Cell respiration produces carbon dioxide and water, which are used in photosynthesis. So in there, they explained where this is taking place, in what part of the cell, and what the products are that are needed and what's produced. Let's go to the second paragraph. The initial energy source of the ecosystem is the sun. Okay, during photosynthesis, light energy from the sun is converted to chemical energy in the form of sugar or starch, which are organic molecules. Some energy is also lost as heat, which is why there needs to be a continual light energy. So we always need to have that energy source available. In cell respiration, the energy stored is glucose or sugar. Those molecules are released when the molecules are broken down and used to produce products, including the high energy molecule ATP. Again, some chemical energy is lost as heat. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about cellular respiration? Again, we looked at what cellular respiration is, and then we brought in that other piece of looking at how photosynthesis and cell respiration create a balance together. They both produce things that the other one needs. So they work together in that carbon cycle and the transformation of carbon. So as we think about and look forward, well, how do we use this information? Well, we have to think about how in ecosystems and in the bigger picture, looking at our whole entire Earth, looking at how those systems are intertwined together. They're both needing products that the other one produces. So they go hand in hand. If one falls or does not happen, if photosynthesis doesn't take place, cellular respiration is not going to take place as well. Okay, let's move on here. So let's talk a little bit about unit introductions and course introductions. So the biggest question we always get when we start a new course is, what am I expected to know? What are the requirements, right? I do it myself when I start a course. I'm like, okay, let me see this. What do I need to know? What am I going to have to do in this course, right? And so we can use our unit objectives to help us answer that question. Let's take a look. So how do we know this information? What are we expected to know? It's all in the course and in the unit introduction. So when you start a course like Biology Semester 1, on one of those first screens that you get to, it gives you the course introduction. And in that introduction, and this is how all the courses are laid out, you get the welcome and then you get learning objectives. These learning objectives right there, it says in this course, it tells you what you're expected to know. And these are all of the units introductions. So the whole entire course is listed here, and each one of these comes from a unit. So each unit is going to give you the answer to this. So think about Biology Semester 1. The first unit is identify the components and the structure of a DNA molecule. Okay, so then in Unit 1, you cover that information. Identify the components and structure of a DNA molecule. So why is this helpful? Well, one, as you're thinking about going through your course, this is the final. This is what the expectations are. So students will ask, how do I study? How do I study? What's going to be on the final? This is it right here. So I always say, can you answer these questions? A great study guide is to go through and write out your answers. A great way to test yourself is to go through and just respond to these introductions, respond to these learning objectives, because this is what the course is based on, and this is what it's going to be on the final. Okay. So that was the course unit and introduction, and then let's take a look at what a unit introduction looks like. So this comes from Unit 5. This is the introduction on cellular respiration that we just talked about. In the course unit, in the unit introduction for cellular respiration, it says, at the end of this unit, you will understand that all living organisms are made up of carbon-based carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Here we have our unit learning objectives. Explain how cells break down energy-rich organic molecules to provide energy for cell functions. Identify the reactants and products of cell respiration, and explain how photosynthesis and cell respiration are interrelated. Okay, so we talked about those three right there in this live session. So as we think about these unit learning objectives and we go back to the course introduction, you can see right there it talks about explain the process of cell respiration. Okay, so by going through unit 5, at the end of that unit, you should be able to explain these three objectives. And again, I always think it's helpful, you can create, maybe you're better off with a notebook and you write down as you go through these courses, these objectives, just write down your answer to it. Or if you're better off at keeping a Word document, you can keep that. And then every course that you go through, just copy and paste these objectives in there. And then as you go through the lessons, answer those. It's going to be so helpful to you when you come to studying for your final or reviewing and preparing for your final as well. Okay, so today, let's take a look at one of these. Identify the reactants and products of cell respiration. We talked about that today. We talked about cellular respiration needing that sugar, that glucose, and oxygen in the mitochondria. In the mitochondria of our cells, it then produces the products, carbon dioxide and ATP. Explain how photosynthesis and cell respiration are interrelated. Well, they balance each other out. Photosynthesis needs carbon dioxide, sunlight, and water, and it produces oxygen and glucose. Cellular respiration needs that glucose and oxygen to take place. So they balance each other out by producing products that each one of them needs. Okay, so again, going back to, what am I expected to know? What are these unit introductions and course introductions for? Again, they tell us what the expectations are. By the end of this course, you will be able to, and then it gives you a chance to know exactly what you're going to be tested over. So the way that the course is kind of set up is that we start with these learning objectives right here. And then each unit answers or provides the lesson, the information on probably a couple of these learning objectives. Okay. Then when we come to the final exam is written off of these objectives. So there's no kind of gray area. There's no trick questions. Okay. This is the final right there. It just might be worded a little bit different to include those multiple choice and true, false, and short answer questions. Okay. So again, as you come to the end of a course and as you go through each one of your units and you're thinking, what am I going to have to do? What do I need to know? Use those objectives to your advantage. And again, for studying for the exam, always come back to that course introduction. You'll see it on the final exam study guide as well. You'll see these listed all over again. Can you go through and answer these questions? That's the best way to study for your final. Okay, so I would suggest that you give these a try, respond to them, and then any ones that you don't feel so comfortable about, maybe go back into that unit that it comes from and take a little refresher in it. Okay, so again, please use those course introductions and unit introductions because that's the basis for the course and how it's set up. Okay, does anybody have any questions about unit introductions or course introductions? Okay, this is also a time that if you have questions about other topics or an activity, this is when you can get that real-time question answer right here. And you can chat, you can take yourself off mute. I'm going to continue to keep talking. Of course, we have these live sessions set up for you guys so you can get that immediate feedback. And it's always nice to have this communication between each other and have this one-to-one kind of liveness of back in the classroom. But as you're going through your courses and you ever have questions about an assignment or an activity or anything that comes around, maybe you have some extended thinking that comes along, please reach out to your teacher. So you can send chat messages, emails, Google Voice, whatever is your preferred method of communication. We never want you guys to feel stuck or frustrated or not sure what to do. A simple question, just send it our way. We're here to help and support you guys. So please don't ever feel like, oh, I'll figure it out, or oh, I'll try and look it up. You know, we're here to help you guys. So as you're going through and you have questions, you don't have to wait for a live session. You know, immediately just send a response and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can, because that's our goal, is to support you guys and get you through your course. And hopefully you're enjoying science at the same time. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions pop in. So I'd also like to say, if you have an idea for a topic in the next live session and you'd like to have a little bit more information on something, or you're thinking ahead, oh, I'm going to be in Unit 2, and you have an idea, please shoot that to me. I would love to take your requests and complete a live session and make it more helpful and beneficial to you. Okay. Okay, guys, well, have a great week in science. And again, reach out if you need some help. Let's get those assignments done and get on our way. Have a great week, you guys. Take care.